There's been first a market-driven change, but I think that we're seeing really just like I'm dealing with the TSO, where a declining interest in owning a small business, we're seeing a decline in small business ownership across the country in favor of larger corporate interests. Some could probably effectively argue that may not be the best for a local community. So,
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm happy to be here today with John D. Marvin, President and CEO of Texas State Optical. How you doing today, John?
I'm great, Andrew. Thank you for inviting me to be with you today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for spending some time. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and Texas State Optical.
Well, my background is in marketing and consumer research, market strategy. And I got involved in the eye care business in the mid 80s, first in ophthalmology. And that introduced me to Texas State Optical in the Houston area. And then from that, I began working with the franchisees at that time in the early 90s is when I first began working with TSO. It was a traditional franchise company, and my involvement work with TSO involved me working to help the franchisees form a franchise association.
Okay.
And at that point, it had about 200 locations, mostly in Texas, but some in Louisiana and Arkansas. And so I began working with that group. And then towards the end of the 90s, a number of the leaders in the franchise community and I were trying to do some planning for the new millennium. And it became apparent to us that the only way they were going to realize what they saw as potential in TSO was if they purchased it. So I helped them for the year of 1999. We started that, took most of the year of 2000 to complete it. I mean, 2000. It's hard to say. It seems 2000 seems like a lifetime ago. It's amazing. But we negotiated that and acquired it and then turned it into a member-owned cooperative so that each franchisee had an opportunity to buy into the corporate company, the franchisor.
Okay.
And we restructured it at that point and decided to operate it as a nonprofit with the primary business focus being to help young optometrists open their own practice and utilize the value and equity of the TSO brand. Texas State Optical was started in Texas in 1936.
Wow.
And so it got a longevity in the state. Probably one of the most common things I hear from people that are, 40 or older is that Texas State Optical is where their parents took them for their very first pair of glasses. And so it was a great opportunity at that point for the franchisees to own it and begin to use it as a kind of a nonprofit way of helping to grow private practice, utilizing the strength of a very well-known brand that has and still does a lot of equity in it. So
now, you mentioned in a previous conversation that corporate optometry is not legal in the state of Texas. So that was the impetus for this sort of organization.
Well, no, I mean, in 1936, when it was started, it was wholly owned by four brothers, two of whom were optometrists, and they built a corporate optometry company with, at that time in the early 60s, well over 300 locations, again, mostly in Texas, but that time had Louisiana and Arkansas and Oklahoma and New Mexico. And due to some changes in Texas optometry law, which limited the ownership of an optometrist can only own 3 locations
Oh.
maximum in Texas. And that combined with making corporate optometry, the idea that a corporation can employ an optometrist, illegal under the Optometry Act, caused these guys that own this 300 location chain to have to divest themselves. And they ended up just selling the locations to people that they had employed in each of them. So they would approach the employed doctor, and so through that process, they divested themselves of all of them. And the limit on number of locations for optometrists, as well as the prohibition on corporate optometry, still exists today. And whereas our neighbor friend in Louisiana, the state of Louisiana, it is not illegal. So I think you and I had talked about, if you go into one of the more popular common chains, for instance, let's just use Walmart.
Mhm.
In Louisiana, Walmart employs the optometrist that works to perform exams, and then they have an in-store optical
Mhm.
where people can buy their eyewear. In Texas, Walmart cannot employ that doctor. So instead, they set up about an 800 square foot space with a door that's separate from the main door, and that optometrist leases that space from Walmart, does the exams, but the people that go to that doctor, they're not obligated at all to purchase their eyewear inside Walmart. They can take it anywhere they want. So there's just a difference in state law. As you know, our great experiment of 50 different laboratories. But Texas is not alone. There are a number of states that prohibit corporate optometry. Used to be, there was a position on corporate medicine itself, but that has long past gone away. But still there's some limitations state to state is going to be different. But in Texas, it is prohibited.
Okay. Are you guys uniquely positioned in terms of having a sort of member-owned nonprofit organization like you do?
I don't know. I wouldn't look at it that way. I think we're well positioned because our brand has got so much value in it. And it gives us a number of different options to pursue. In the past 5 years, companies that are financed and largely owned by private equity firms have been buying up optometry practice all across the country. And in the last 5 years, they've entered Texas. What kept them at bay for the previous 5 to 10 was this corporate prohibition. But they have worked a way around that that has not been challenged successfully yet. Could, but it's doubtful at this point because there's just, due to some inside state regulation issues, it's doubtful that there will be a successful prosecution. So as they've come into the marketplace and begin consolidating and buying up practices and operating them as corporate owned optometry practices, then what we're seeing is that combined with a decline in young optometrists coming out of optometry school having an interest in owning their own practice, and many of them, if the large majority of them, preferring a salaried position instead. And so those things kind of come together and change the marketplace. And so I think that TSO is well positioned because with a brand that is well known and has got such a strong positive perception of it among consumers, we can either go the corporate route if we want to, or we can continue to work on a more franchise-like model, or we can do both. So I think that our options are pretty unlimited. And so our strategic plan, our business plan includes both of those options as our plans for growth.
I would hope that your quote unquote franchisee model would position you to do battle with this proliferation of online low cost mail order glasses. I get emails 20 times a day now from insert name of glasses company here for cents on the dollar to what it costs when I go to the optometrist. How are you guys dealing with that sort of change in the marketplace?
Well, that's largely driven by two attributes. One is convenience, because it's very convenient to shop online. Most of us spent at least 1 year, if not two, getting groceries online and purchasing about whatever we needed online. So, and that actually accelerated all online activity because people who otherwise hadn't really shopped that way were forced to for a period of time. And so what people have learned is it's extremely convenient to do that. And with online providers or online retailers bending over backwards to make it convenient in terms of returns or remakes and so forth, then that preference has grown. The other aspect of it is cost. And if you take a look at all the online optical, you'll end up probably concluding that the kind of the sweet spot of the retail price point is somewhere between $99 and $119 for a complete pair of eyewear with free shipping. And if you've been wearing glasses for any period of time, and the last time you went to an eye doctor and bought it in their location, it probably cost you somewhere between $300 and $400. And so if you're trying to save a couple of $100 and you're thinking, and they say guaranteed, shipping free, no return, you can return it if it doesn't work. I mean, why wouldn't you try that? And if it lives up to your expectation or better, why would you go back to paying $300 to $400 when you could buy it more conveniently and less expensively? And so that's a big challenge to in-store providers, we call them offices, in-office providers, because they're going to have to deal with that price reckoning. The large majority of online commerce is single vision eyewear. Mm-hmm. And that's the easiest to be able to manufacture in that type of a deliveries channel without problems. If you are older than 40, you most likely need a multifocal or a bifocal. And now we largely use progressive lenses. And those are a lot more difficult, and you'll not find a whole lot of those being sold online. So, but I think the lesson, and the least lesson we're taking out of it, is we've got to address the fact that a consumer pays $400 for a pair of glasses with us or someone like us. And then they see an advertisement on a television for another competitor that says, you can get 2 pair of glasses and a free eye exam for $89. And the consumer looks at that and says, wow, by the time I got glasses and an exam, it was almost $500. What's up with this? And while they might be skeptical that they could get something that they would like for $89 complete, 2 pair, instead of 1 pair and exam for $500, they're still going to ask the question, what's up with this? Why is there such a difference? It's not $500 and $399, it's $589. Mm-hmm. And I think that the industry in general has to address that. And certainly we have to in terms of the price point. Now, we don't have to match 89 and give away an exam, but we have to be conscious of the fact that people are very price sensitive when it comes to eyewear. And that was before we had inflation, more inflation than we've had in 40 years. So you combine that on top of it, it becomes an even greater pressure on people like us, organizations like us. So we've got to really kind of rethink this and figure out what our pricing model is going to be, and figure out the kind of the path forward with what can lose the least, and attract people with a level of confidence that they're going to get quality eyewear.
Well, I guess it's most important to educate people that, well, the way you look is interesting. Your eye health is still the number one priority here, right? We're not talking about a little matter. These are not sunglasses, right? This is your eye health at the end of the day. And you need to go to people who know what they're doing and are taking care of you. And doing that online is not necessarily the way to go.
Well, the majority of e-commerce business in our industry is not the clinical piece, it's the retail piece.
Mm-hmm.
And people today, much more than just a few years ago, have an attitude, well, I'm going to try it, and if I don't like it, I'll send it back.
Yeah.
Because all I got to do is run to a UPS store and put it in a sandwich bag, and they'll take it from there. And I mean, when it's that kind of convenience, people are inclined to try it.
Of course.
Now, we believe that we still have a better value proposition for people, but it's become the focus has got to be, when you come to get that quality eye exam, we've got to assure you that you can get a really good pair of eyewear, quality pair of eyewear, and it's going to be worth what you pay for it. You're going to walk out of here feeling like you got a great deal, even if you did spend $500. Not everybody drives smart cars. A lot of people drive Buicks and are willing to pay that extra money to do so because the value they get for their investment is justified to them. And I think we've never had to do that. We've never had to really take a position where we have to, I don't want to use the word justify necessarily, but we haven't really had to persuade people in the value proposition that we've got, because their options were largely us or someone like us. And now that Warby Parker broke the seal on this whole thing, we've had to deal with that. And I think, frankly, rightfully so. Rightfully so.
Well, hey, we still live in a capitalist country, and everybody has to have the opportunity to come up with a new way of doing business, and we all have to adjust accordingly. Unfortunately, the Amazon, what's the word I'm looking for? Dynamic has changed a lot of things for a lot of people, and it's put a lot of brick and mortars out of business, unfortunately. I have to admit, I'm guilty. If there's a high-end piece of equipment, I might go to a store to check it out. But at the end of the day, if somebody can hand it to me at my front door with an easy return for a few $100s less than that store, I'm not in a position to use my heart over my wallet, right? So it's a tough dynamic that we all have to deal with now in the 21st century.
And I agree with you completely. I think the turning point preceded Amazon. And I think that turning point was the proliferation of Walmart across the country. Because I don't know if you're old enough to remember, in the beginning, Walmart largely was limited to rural areas that didn't have access to the type of variety of choice in products and services that a small town of 25,000 or 50,000 people would normally have. And that had a huge negative impact on small business in those communities.
Absolutely.
And then when they began to move into the large metropolitan areas, that just continued. And in a way, it was a major disruption in retail. And the next wave of that disruption was online and Amazon. But we had numbed our sense of community and local business responsibility, because what the heck, why would I pay $20 for something from my small business in my small town when I could get a China version for 1/10 of the price? And so people made that choice. And by the time we kind of woke up to this, half of Main Street was gone. And I think that there's been first a market driven change, but I think that we're seeing, really, just like I'm dealing with the TSO, where a growing, or excuse me, a declining interest in owning a small business, we're seeing a decline in small business ownership across the country in favor of larger corporate interests. And some could probably effectively argue that may not be the best for a local community. So,
Well, and leads into my next question, which relates to the challenges and opportunities of growing your business in COVID. I would imagine people are more gun shy than ever to be a small Main Street business owner after the last couple of years with just, I mean, nobody saw it coming, obviously, right? The world shutting down overnight. And obviously Texas didn't shut down quite the way we did here in California and some other states, but still there was a huge change in how business was conducted. How did it affect TSO?
well, I think actually we fared much better than most for a couple of reasons. One was certainly the fact that we were in Texas and our state and local governments were not as draconian in their approach to it. The second thing, though, was that all of our 120 locations are owned by entrepreneurs. And if they're not seeing patients, they've got no money to pay their rent or their utilities or others, as opposed to, I know there was a large private equity company that was in Texas at the same time, and they didn't reopen their locations for 4 months after we did. Our locations were closed for about 2 weeks in mid to late March of 2020. In April, we had about a third of our locations open. By May, we had them all open. And this corporate entity, who has no entrepreneurial aspect to it other than they're paying ODs to work, optometrists to work, they didn't open up until September, fully open till September, or even some in the fall. And the reason is not because the corporate leadership didn't want to open, is all of these employees refused to come back, and particularly the doctors, out of fear. And ours had a different motivation. And so they were able to set their fear aside and just move forward with some common sense kind of protections, if you could refer to any of that craziness as common sense. But they took much more of a kind of a practical approach to things, and says, well, we don't want everybody to get sick and die, but at the same time, we can't just stay shut down for the next 4 or 5 months. We've got to get back open and pay people cover payrolls and pay for rents and et cetera. So I think that the fact that it was a small business organization helped us recover much more quickly. From the individual small business perspective, though, we were able to deliver corporate-like resources and information to give them the guidance they needed to do so safely. Whereas if an individual, private, independent optometrist is out there, they don't have any of that resource. And so they just had to pay attention to the news media, which never a good idea. And and their friends and their acquaintances, half of which were telling them, "Don't open, it's too dangerous," and the others were going, "You got to open, you got to pay your rent," and they were kind of in a quandary. But so we had all the advantages of a large corporate structure, but the spirit and individuality and independence of entrepreneurs, and so I think that helped us a lot.
I repeat, I think your the way you have organized Texas State Optical is uniquely positioned to move forward in this sort of marketplace. And I applaud your foresight back 20 years ago for putting that together.
Thank you.
What's something you'd like to be celebrating 1 year from now, personally, professionally, either or both?
Well, I'd like to celebrate opening of 10 new locations, and that's part of our growth plan. So I think from a corporate standpoint, a business standpoint, I'd like to do that. There's really largely two things that drive our business model. One is the number of locations, and then helping each, the old adage of there's only one way to make money in business, and that is either get new customers or sell to the ones you got already. And my customers are optometrists that have their own locations. And I'd like to do both. I'd like to add new customers, new locations, and then I'd like to come up with innovative ways to help them in such a way that it translates into more revenue for the corporation. And so I think that's one of the things I'd like.
Excellent. And personally, what would you like to celebrate a year from now?
Well, I've been on a pretty stringent weight loss program, and so I'd like that to continue. And I'm planning to lose another 40 pounds this year.
40.
So
that's
40
a lofty
pounds.
goal. Good for you. I wish you the best of luck with that. I know the holidays aren't the easiest time to keep those things up.
No, well, I've come through the difficult part, right? The new Thanksgiving, the big meal food holidays. So
John D. Marvin of Texas State Optical, it's been lovely having you with us today. Appreciate you spending some time with Business Ninjas.
well, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it, and I appreciate the work you're doing with the podcast. I think it's great.
Well, thank you.